Welcome to The Joyful Frugalista, the podcast that's all about living a richer life with less. I'm your host, Serina Bird, author and passionate frugalista. Each episode, we dive into inspiring stories, practical tips and joyful conversations that help you create abundance, embrace mindful spending, and live your best life, all without breaking the bank. So grab a cuppa, get comfy, and let's explore how being a frugalista can lead to freedom, happiness, and a whole lot of joy. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making financial decisions. Hello, frugalistas, and welcome to today's episode. Today, I have a special guest. Of course, all of my guests are special. Today, I'm going to speak with someone in Australia's financial independence community, and here's someone that guests have repeatedly asked that I interview. But first, if you love this podcast and find it useful, please pay it forward by liking or commenting, and also join the Joyful Frugalista Facebook group to join in on discussions with like-minded frugalistas. Today, I'm joined by Captain FI. If you don't know him, you should, as he's a bit of a legend in the financial independence, or as it's commonly known, FI community. He's a former pilot, financial educator, writer, and host of the hugely popular Captain FI podcast. He's known for his down-to-earth approach to investing, transparency, and the ups and downs of his FI journey and passion for simplifying personal finance. So hello and welcome, Captain.
G'day, Serena. Thanks for inviting me on today. I know this is a recording we've tried to make happen for some time.
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh my God, don't say it out loud like that. You're going to embarrass me. Wow. Serena, a lot has changed, I think, since we first caught up at
the Fire Spark retreat.
Yes, Fire Spark down in
Queenscliff.
Yes, down in and what an awesome time that was. Yeah, it was really cool. We'd also just bought our acreage, and I think we'd just settled, we'd driven up from Adelaide and basically unpacked some of the boxes, and then I jumped on a flight down to Melbourne to make the meetup, and it was pretty cool. So my head was still spinning a little bit when I got there.
So that's Adelaide to southeast Queensland?
Yep, it was one heck of a road trip. We split it up into, I think it was 3 or 4, 4 days, 3 nights. And in true fire frugalista fashion, we actually camped in a rooftop tent on our drive up.
My God, I've seen those. I've always been so scared of thinking I might fall out of one.
Well, look, once it's up and you're in, it's actually pretty cozy, and the walls are quite strong. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to be in it if it was moving.
No, you certainly wouldn't want to be. But I hear you about road trips. I like a good road trip. And it took a little while. My children it started because my kids said, oh my God, I haven't flown in ages. This is during COVID. I don't want to do a road trip. So I went, well, that's it. You're too entitled. We're doing a road trip. So we did a big one from Canberra to the Gold Coast. And actually, it's quite fun. And then they sort of got a little bit used to the Macca's stops. They said, oh, we won't stop at Hungry Jack's. We'll only stop at Macca's. And I went, right. Well, we're going to nip that one in the bud. So now I prepare the sandwiches or pizza or something else. We have a bake up the night before, and we have snacks to take with us as well.
Do you know, that you've just reminded me of a really sort of precious core memory to me, which was when I was young. I used to go on road trips with my mum and sometimes my siblings as well. Often we'd travel. I'm originally from southeast of South Australia, and near the border of Victoria. And so we were living in Adelaide, and we would drive back down to see, friends and family. And it's a pretty long drive, 6 hours or so for a young kid. And my mum used to make these little show bag, goodie bag things, and, like a big brown paper bag, and it would have, you'd have a juice box, or as I learned when I moved out of South Australia, a popper, as I believe the New South Welshmen call it. Little drink, maybe some Hubba Bubba, bubble gum. And we used to get these, she used to have these cassette tapes that we'd put in for entertainment. And I keep remembering this one song, I was like, click, clack, front and back. And I think Peter Coombe, and yeah, either way. Anyway, it's a really cool memory. So I want to make memories like that with my kids. So yeah, that's we'll have to
Isn't
find some
it
destinations, I
amazing?
reckon.
Like your mum was probably beating herself up at the time about how she didn't have a lot of money and she's created these other little rituals. But those are the things you actually look back on and remember and value.
Yeah, I wish I could go one more.
I know it's been a difficult time for you the last couple of years, I know. So how has the
Yes,
fire journey, sorry, over to you.
yeah, no, yeah, go ahead.
So how has the fire journey shaped your life?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I'd almost propose it the other way around, and I would say, how has my life shaped my fire journey? For people that aren't sort of familiar with my story, when I was really young, my parents separated. We left a large rural property and moved up to the city. My siblings and I. And my parents separated, and so yeah, we grew up. I had an amazing childhood. My mum was incredible. She was a teacher. She worked in early childhood education, a kindy teacher. So she really, that was her area of expertise, right? It was developing brains and music, and so she put a lot of intention and thought into how we were going to be raised, and I guess no doubt that somewhat was the reason to why my parents separated, because it wasn't a healthy environment as a young child. So we didn't have a lot, but boy, we had plenty. You know what I mean? Like, we had electricity, we had running water, we had clothes, we had hot food for our bellies. Yeah, okay. So we didn't, go to concerts. We didn't really travel overseas or anything like that. But, none of that is really required for a happy, wholesome life. And we had it a lot better than a lot of people too. So I was super grateful for everything that my mum did for us. And, she was really big on education. And so she really encouraged us to work hard in school. I had a bit of behavioral issues when I was younger.
Did you really?
Yeah. Just take this Ritalin and whatever else it was. And, it worked for a little while and sort of grew out of it. Didn't want to take the medication. But, thankfully, as I got a bit older and started to get really, passionate about, STEM, physics, chemistry, maths, and science. I found like high school to be quite a challenge, and really just wanted to sort of grab, as I saw on a van. Driving a lot when I was driving earlier today. There was a van and it had "Grab Life by the Balls" written on it, and I think this is a charity here in the Brisbane area, like a men's mental health thing. So when when I started really getting into the sort of the challenge of school, I was like, yep, sort of grab this by the balls, to borrow a euphemism from that van. And it was awesome. I had great teachers. Again, I was really fortunate that I had teachers that, that cared and that were passionate and loved their job. I still remember Mr. Hodgson was my chemistry teacher. Maybe I shouldn't be naming names here, but anyway, let's call him Mr. X. Was my
Well, I mean,
chemistry
there's
teacher.
probably so many teachers throughout Australia who have the same name, chemistry or not. I
Oh
think it's all the
yeah, no,
same.
I'm just kidding. It's an old Simpsons gag. But anyway, he would let me run experiments. I'm talking like year 10, 11, 12. He would let me muck around and play around in the lab, and it just really piqued my my curiosity, and like really sort of fed that desire to learn more about what was actually happening. And then we could then look at what was actually happening in terms of like the chemical reactions, and balancing out equations and looking at electron flows. And yeah, I just found that to be really, really cool. So always had an interest in the technical side of things, and I was then sort of led into engineering, as I was quite good at maths and science. Won some awards, and yeah, so got into that. I ended up getting essentially like a fully paid, like a scholarship where I was paid whilst I was studying, which was really cool. And then, yeah, so again, another awesome point to note there, no HEX debt, right? But also was earning whilst I was learning. And then, yeah, I worked a couple of different roles within the organization, and I had put all of my money that I was earning, plus, all my little side hustles, and, I was tutoring, maths and physics. I wrote a blog article where I think there's like 17 or 18 different side hustles that I was doing through university and then sort of my early postgraduate days to earn
Wow.
money and basically throw every dollar I had into flight training. I think I spent about 350,000 on various qualifications and ratings and endorsements.
Sorry, let's just run that
Which,
by
by the
again.
way, yeah. So
150,000.
look, it's a lot, and to be honest, any aspiring pilots out there, like you do not have to pay that much. Like, for example, I was addicted to flying a plane called a Pitts Special, and it was very expensive, and so I would go out and do like aerobatic flights in it. It's all good professional development and training, but you don't have to be like a fantastic aerobatic display pilot if you want to land a transport pilot job. It obviously depends where you want to go. Like, hey, if you want to become a fighter pilot, then yeah, maybe you should be doing some good aerobatics and displays and that kind of stuff. Or maybe that and the hands and feet. I don't know. I was not a fighter pilot, so I can't really comment. But I really enjoyed it, and then it led me into instructing. I was teaching people how to fly, and that's something I've always loved doing. And it's I've had a little break from flying, as people might know, which I guess I'll get to. But yeah, I eventually got employment as a pilot. Found myself traveling all over the world, all over Australia, and loving life. All of a sudden, of course, I had very little expenses. I was often put up in hotels for work. I had subsidized rental. Everything was really working in my favor. And of course, as I mentioned, didn't have any HEX. So basically just found myself in a position where I had, it sounds a bit like, I'm not saying this like to be boastful, but I basically had more money than I knew what to do with. And it's funny because when I was like searching around, one of the gurus in the personal finance space, most people would be familiar with the name Mr. Money Mustache, from over in the US. And he literally had to basically come to the exact same uh, outcome where, he was working, I believe, as a software engineer or something. He was getting paid quite a lot of money, and literally him and his wife couldn't spend the money. They were sort of forced to learn about investing. And so I was really fortunate in that, my progress was on the shoulders of giants, and there's quite a lot of very intelligent people that have come through before me. And I was able to learn from that. I was able to learn from, the Barefoot Investor, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then, of course, legends in the Australian fire community like Dave Gower, Strong Money Australia, Aussie
Mm-hmm.
Firebug, blogs like yourself, Serina. There's amazing amount of wealth of information available if people want to just sort of reach out and grab it. And
And
of course,
I guess that's the key there. If they want to reach out and grab it, like you talk about having more money than you know what to do with, but I'm pretty sure you were working with people who had a good idea about how to spend their money and spent a lot.
yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and that was one thing actually in the end that I wouldn't say the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was always a bit of a turnoff for me in the work environment where, we would say we would be going on an overseas trip, and, we all know that we all get paid very well. We also are going to receive some pretty hefty allowances, and then people would, sometimes people would, in their head, they would have spent the money before they've even earned it. In that regard, I guess maybe I didn't fully, sometimes I felt like I didn't fit in a bit because I didn't really subscribe to the smoke 'em if you got 'em culture. I was always, wanting to save and invest. And the reason why I said earlier that my life sort of shaped my fire journey is that I feel like in a way I discovered fire, and I used it as a bit of a crutch, or as a bit of a coping mechanism for maybe needing a little bit more control over my life, or feeling like I had a bit less control than I desired. And so,
There's kind of a
subconsciously
goal,
for
isn't
me,
there? There's an
well, that's
outcome,
right.
there's a
Yeah,
metric,
it's
there's something
about,
you can measure.
that's right. Like we're chasing this ephemeral concept of freedom. And do you know what's funny? When I recently went to Canberra, I caught up with a very good friend of mine, and we went to a little philosophy meetup thing at a pub. It was actually right after I got off the plane, and I was dubious. It was actually really cool. The topic was you wouldn't really want freedom if you knew what it was, or something along those lines. And it was really cool chewing the fat with. And then I think the guy was a philosopher. I believe it's called the Little School of Earth. The man's name is Ian, and it was, yeah, really, really cool guy. And it's at Smith's bookshop, which I think is actually a pub. But there was some books there.
Smith's Alternate. I haven't sold books for a long time, but they have some really out there performances and events. It's pretty cool.
Well, we also sang sea shanties afterwards, which was pretty awesome. I can't say I've ever
Wow.
done that. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. It went for about
I
an
would
hour.
actually love that.
Yeah. Look, David, I'm getting sidetracked here. So, for me, I felt like I'd always wanted to fly. I'd always wanted to be a pilot, and I'd finally made it into my career. And, in some regards, I wanted to try and maybe impress my father. I'd had family members who worked in the aviation industry. Yeah, I just wanted to maybe follow that family connection. And then when I got into it, it was hard work. It was hard work, and long days, and you sacrifice a lot of personal freedoms. And then especially when we say the big C word, COVID, started um, making things complicated, I would sometimes be sort of living in my apartment in the city, or in a hotel room in confinement, or quarantine, or whatever it was called. And then you'd be called on another task, and then you do flight, come back, and your quarantine would reset. And so it was just, at one point I was like, God, I haven't slept in my own bed in, I can't even remember when. So it did certainly become fatiguing, and spending time living overseas as well was particularly challenging, in the Middle East. And yeah, so it the financial independence, retire early, it became like this fantasy of mine of, I'll be happy when I reach fire. I will be happy when I have the freedom to do whatever I want. And yeah, that really, since I was used to having somewhat of a frugal upbringing, it was fairly easy for me to fall into this. I wouldn't necessarily call it a scarcity mindset, because it wasn't that I was afraid of losing the money. No, I was going all in on investing. And, I did learn about investing and made some silly mistakes, buying individual shares, doing a stock picking subscription. Actually, that was through the Barefoot Investor, the Barefoot Blueprint, which thankfully it closed down, which I think was a good move. And then, yeah, just index investing, really, really boring. I dabbled in a few other little bits here and there, but predominantly, I would say, mostly index investing, a property development, and online business. So running my own business on content advertising. And those three things, well, being able to aggressively save, the majority of my pay, we're talking like 75, 80%. I'd have to
Wow,
refresh.
that's quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, almost like in hindsight, almost like very extreme, right? Like at the time it felt super achievable and felt super normal, but that was because I feel like I was living in a pretty stressed out state. And again, I was subscribing to this, I will be happy when, I think is that called destination happiness or something? Anyway, it's not good, right? Because you've just got to enjoy the now, and you never know, like, when your road finishes, right? So I'm not saying don't save your money and do fire. I still think fire is wonderful. And if you have the ability to save, more than the majority of your pay, it's going to make your life a lot easier.
It's a
But
hard thing. I talk a
it
bit
is,
about this in my first book, The Joyful Frugalista, because you don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard, right? But you want to be thinking about tomorrow, especially, there's a huge problem with women in their late 50s who are effectively homeless or people who are locked out of the housing market for various reasons. So, and I think too, as a parent, and I know you're a parent now, you sort of also want the best for your children. So it is a hard thing between not being totally miserable right now, still doing the things you want, but also preparing for a better future.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly, Serena, since becoming a parent, I think my personal like philosophy on spending has changed a lot. And this was another like little privilege that I had during my fire journey is that I didn't have kids and I was able to work a lot and a lot of overtime and my costs of living were so low. So, when people see like the 75, the 80, some months 90% savings rates, and they go, "Oh, geez, how could I ever achieve that?" Well, it's you've got to compare apples with apples, and comparing someone who's single, a high earning role, and that's working insane hours, maybe 18 plus hour days. It's just not helpful to compare. They say comparison is the thief of joy. But certainly since, we've been in the property here now for, oh gosh, we must be coming up to our third year. So this must be our second anniversary. I've had a lot of time to decompress. I realized that a lot of the behaviors that I had were not healthy. So I've had time to heal. I've still gone through a lot of therapy and also, just being in my garden, being with my bees, planting trees, and now raising my kids, it has brought me a lot of peace. And so I feel like, I'm definitely a lot more chilled out. I think my frugal muscles maybe have atrophied a little. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still, I still drive a 20-year-old car and all that. Maybe a good example is recently we have an acreage and our home is quite long. So we have, we have sort of not really good phone reception. And so you can't really rely on cellular data. So we use Wi-Fi for a lot. And so I've been sort of struggling with a system of repeaters and repeaters and repeaters that I had cobbled together piecemeal over time as we wanted more signal in different areas of the property. And oh my gosh, like what a horrible system. And it was just clunky and, you would have to manually hand off to different networks. And I did that because I didn't want to spend, I think it was like $1,500 on a large Wi-Fi mesh network. And recently, just the other day, we said, well, we'll take the plunge. So we spent the money, we got the system with, I think, the 7 nodes, and it's fantastic. It's seamless handoff through the property, and it's like been a massive quality of life improvement. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to rush out and drive Lamborghinis because we'll all be happier if we spend more. Like, that's not the case at all. I think it's just important to be intentional with your spending, and I'm definitely more focusing now on trying to think about, hey, what actually really matters? What really matters for me is like quality time with my family. And, I want everyone to be sort of comfortable in the home. So yeah, just little quality of life improvements. And I have my little marketplace. Basically, if I want to buy something new, I will aim to sell something on Marketplace or, Gumtree or wherever before. I just predominantly use Facebook Marketplace. I will try and sell something so that I can cash flow that purchase. So I actually been selling quite a few beehives recently, and yeah, we put the money from the beehives into the Wi-Fi mesh
So
system, which
you've
was
been
pretty cool.
raising bees, but now you're selling the beehives.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, one of the first things we did was on the property, we bought a local beekeeping business where a lovely couple that wanted to basically retire from, their small business. Yeah, it wasn't, only a couple of hives, but it was handy because they obviously have a network of customers and, all the periphery equipment that you need when it comes to keeping bees. And obviously I couldn't bring my bees from South Australia into Queensland because it's logistically it's a nightmare. And two, there's a lot of biosecurity regulations. I always just plan to buy local bees. So up here in southeast Queensland, the Italian bees are the go. They're well suited to the climate here, the humidity, and the mild winters. So I bought that off them, and we still keep in touch with them. They're lovely. It's funny we sort of we said, all right, whether you like it or not, we're keeping in touch, and you're going to be our adopted grandparents here because we don't know anyone else here. So
Oh, that's so sweet.
and they're lovely, so they come over for morning tea, and we still visit, and yeah, it's really nice. And yeah, and so with bees, it's you can expand your apiary, they call it, which is like your beehives are in an apiary, and you just basically, when the hive gets big and strong enough, you can take a split. I do something called a walkaway split, which means you don't even need to buy another queen. You literally just let them rear their own queen. You can, add fuel to the fire, so to speak, by feeding them sugar syrup. And that usually just sort of gives them a bit more oomph and gets them up quicker. But we're just so fortunate. We're really in this beautiful area, lots and lots of flowering trees, nut trees,
Oh,
the area
stop.
we're
I'm
in.
in a almost winter in Canberra. I love it here, but yes, it's
Yes,
very cold.
yes, no, I know. I was only there recently, and yeah, I don't, I don't envy you in that respect, Serena. I tell you what, like people say, oh, Queensland is where people go to retire. I understand why. It's, it, even in Adelaide, and I know this might be too much information for people listening, but say in the morning, you get out of bed, you go to the bathroom, oh God, the tiles are so cold. Sit on the toilet, oh, it's so cold. Everything's cold in winter. Whereas here, God, never even gets below 3 degrees, 4 degrees. So it's pretty manageable.
Yeah, if it gets below that, everyone complains. We just laugh as Queenslanders. We go up in winter and my kids swim and everyone's like freaking out. And I'm going, no, they're Canberrans. My youngest son wears shorts when it's -5. So
Oh
we're
God.
used to it. But anyway,
Yeah.
it
So
sounds like
yeah.
quite the idyllic lifestyle you have.
Look, it's nice now, and I guess I'm really fortunate through, I guess, some front end load, the work that I did do to try and earn quite a bit and to invest has really helped us. But I guess coming back to the original question, how I became a money nerd, it was really, I had surplus funds. I knew I needed to do something with them, and I guess I had this chronic sense of unease about money and the future, and sort of, I guess in that respect, a scarcity mindset of thinking, oh, geez, what if I lose my job? What if this happens? Lots of what if catastrophizing. And so I just wanted some certainty. And I think at its core, I think we all are seeking certainty, and life, unfortunately, is uncertain. And so really, we just have to learn how to manage that uncertainty, and risk management is really the core of everything we do in decision making. But yeah, so my thought process to try and manage that risk and to try and regain some security, regain some certainty and control was to build passive income, and I predominantly did that through index fund investing, a little bit of property and online business, and and then I basically started blogging about my experience because I saw people like Mr. Money Moustache, Mad Scientist, Aussie Firebug, Strong Money Australia, and I thought, hey, I'm going to do that. I'm going to talk about my experiences. I'm going to share my fails, my wins, and I'm going to keep like a diary, like a money diary, and I call them the net worth updates. And I like to actually refer to them as net wealth updates now, because for a long time I'd sort of associate my wealth with my worth, and I think, oh, I'm worth this much, and like, yes, financially, okay, maybe that's the terminology or the lexicon that people are using, but I just think like
Yeah. I
it's
think it's
not,
a really I think it's a really important distinction because they're realizing now that financial capital is just one of the many types of capital that we have, isn't it? Like, there's still community, there's faith, there's a whole range of different things.
yeah, absolutely. And, they say like once you reach financial independence, you have like this existential crisis and a lot of people, it's a shame, not a lot of people get to experience it, because it really does force you to look at your values and work out what do you actually want out of life. And it can be very uncomfortable when you realize you don't know what you want to do with your life. And yeah, so certainly like when I had the ability, like it took me ages, like I I still worked for another year, almost year and a half, maybe 2 years, because I was like, you know, one more, I'll just get another 100K, I'll just get another, 10 grand of passive income, blah, blah, blah. And that one day itis, I actually, unfortunately, the universe really, and look, I'm a technical guy. I've studied engineering. Pilot. I believe in science. And then so this concept of like the universe or God or some kind of force, I was never really, I never really believed in it. But either way, call it fate, call it destiny, call it the universe, call it God, basically forced me to leave flying. Hopefully temporarily, and I'll get back into it. But certainly, I had a bunch of personal issues, family health. Fortunately, the loss of my parents, and a few other big life changes and some personal health issues. Yeah, it really just sort of forced me to stop. And it does remind me of that saying. Oh, I'm gonna butcher it here. Sorry, I haven't prepared, right? So we're just freeballing here.
Which is the best, actually. When we
Yeah,
caught
it's
up
like,
in Canberra, it was the same. You could have talked for hours.
yeah, if you don't like prioritize, I can't remember this saying properly, but it's along the lines of, if you don't prioritize your health, like it will force you to prioritize your health. And so that's kind of what happened to me. And I basically just burnt out, from being in a really, really peak state of arousal, high performance, high technical workload, doing multiple things, really, multiple forms of employment. And yes, whilst I was able to earn and invest a good amount of money, I sort of paid for it with my mental health. And, now we've got this block. It's really nice. I've got, a lovely family, and it's been brilliant to just live a much slower, more intentional life. And it's definitely brought me definitely a more deeper sense of calm and sense of appreciation and gratitude for what I have. I'm not perfect, we all have our ups and downs. So some days, I still get stressed out, but I try and just think about, in the grand scheme of things, it's not too bad. If I'm having to put together a retaining wall and, it's hard work and I don't have the right tools or something, or my hands hurt, my back hurts. I go, well, it's great to have that choice to be able to do this project myself and to be able to choose my hard. I find myself thinking I'm very grateful to be able to choose my hard. Would I do it again? Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe if I was going to go back, I think maybe a sprint to the finish line isn't the healthiest and most sustainable option. Unfortunately, that's kind of my personality. I think a more sustainable, like work is good. Like work's even better. I can't remember who said this. Work is even better when you don't need the money. Maybe it was Mr. Money Moustache, but work's good. Like I find myself now finding out ways of work, whether that's like volunteering with the beekeeping club or doing the beekeeping. Yeah. Working on the farm, producing food, growing things, trading. It's, you will find ways and things to do. And I would say I'm almost busier now than I ever have been. I have to be careful about adding things to my calendar. But no, it's really good. And I think, rather than this crazy sprint to the finish line where you're working absolutely atrocious hours and most likely paying a whole bunch of tax along the way, maybe a more sustainable option is part-time work. Yeah, just food for thought, really. I think it's just such a personal thing. It comes down to everyone's individual circumstances, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And, particularly women have traditionally been more likely to have part-time work, particularly as they balance caring responsibilities. But then, of course, there is an issue because they live longer and they often have much less that they retire on as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a thing, and my wife and I, we talk about this a lot, and I guess we are in a fortunate position now where we are able to get by with part-time workload. We've built systems of income for us, through things like the beekeeping, the tutorials, online income streams, mental income streams. It that does sometimes present a little bit of a trap, in that we could quite easily, um, withdraw a lot more. Now, my wife, she works in the allied health field, and it's important to both of us that, she continues to practice as an income stream. And, whilst obviously we have no plans to separate, in fact, the concept is just abhorrent to even think of. I came from a single parent. I was raised by my mum as a single mum. It's important to protect yourself, and so for her to maintain her professional credentials and practice is really important as an insurance for her. And you know, I was very grateful for my mum. She did amazing, by the way, and she retired. She paid off her house and still was able to draw a pretty big income stream from her super until she passed away. And so, I kind of look to her for inspiration when we're kind of planning out our lives. And I think she would be proud of what my wife's doing.
Sure she would be. Now, believe it or not, I have one final question for you, which
Yeah,
is,
far
do
away.
you have a frugalista tip to share? Is there something you do to save money that, might be quirky or unique, or just something that you think is just a really great hack?
Serena, I have so many frugalista tips. Look, a big one for me, and like people hate this one too because everyone always like gives me crap for it. But like I just drive an old car. Like I have my car, it's 20 years old and it's fine. Like I don't do a lot of driving, so it's got just like it's, I think 180,000 Ks now. And it's, I look after it. I service it myself. You can buy all the things you need from like Repco or Autobarn or Super Cheap. It's not expensive. And like, if you're not mechanically minded and you're not able to take responsibility for servicing the car, okay, maybe don't do it. But in today's information age, there's this thing called YouTube. I'm sure no one's heard
It's
of it, right?
amazing, isn't it?
YouTube. Any information you want, like, oh my gosh, my air conditioning stopped working in my car. And rather than paying, potentially thousands of dollars at a shop, I just went on YouTube and like, you might think it's like this oddly specific query that you would type into Google to get or YouTube. But trust me, someone has had that issue probably, and if it was an older car, probably 10 years before you or maybe 20, and it'll be somewhere in a forum or someone's got a YouTube video. And all you have to do is watch the video. And, I was very fortunate. I found a couple of really good videos and basically showed me how to do everything I needed to, replace the aircon accessory belt and get everything all, tensioned up properly. And yeah, and it really only took a couple of hours of research and then going out and getting my hands dirty. Look, personally, I probably wouldn't attempt to do something like, change the engine over or do a new engine block or, something like that. But certainly the peripheral maintenance stuff I think is super manageable and achievable for most people. If you put a little bit of effort and focus into it, I'm sure you'd be surprised at just how much you can achieve. And, it can reduce your annual maintenance costs from thousands down to potentially even under $100 a year if we're talking basic oil and filter. So it's worth looking into. So maybe you could even go one further and you could say maybe, cycle more instead of driving. I just,
That's what we do, but we can because of where we live, because I'm less than 5 kilometers from work.
yeah, see, that's awesome. I used to use an e-bike at one point to get to my work at the airport, and I used to get a few strange looks from some of the other pilots. No, certainly where I am, unfortunately, a car is a necessity. So, yep, I just try and reduce those costs by maintaining it myself. We have third-party insurance only, so we basically self-insure for otherwise what would be a quite expensive comprehensive policy. And yeah, we basically those premiums just go into, at the moment, we're paying off the mortgage debt. So we're in a sort of a debt payoff mode at the moment. And yeah, I figure the money's better in my pocket than the insurance companies.
I actually have something that I want to acknowledge that I've read for something that you've written, which I wish my husband would take more attention to. And that is your story about selling your motorbike. So he has his mid life crisis motorbike that he hasn't ridden in about 6 years. But he hates me getting on his case about the fact he has to do something about it. But you wrote so eloquently about selling your motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah, it was a beautiful bike, beautiful Yamaha R6. I loved riding that thing. I'll be honest, I was probably being a bit stupid on it. They are a pretty serious thing. Any motorcycle is, but once you get into the 600 or the 1000 cc class motorcycles, the power to weight ratios are just pretty insane. And yeah, I was just probably, I wouldn't say I was reckless, but certainly taking risks. And at the end of the day, like most motorcycle accidents, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, maybe we'll look up the stats, but my understanding is actually not the motorcyclist that's at fault. It can just be like, oops, sorry, didn't see you, mate. When a car pulls out and wipes you out. And, especially now as a father, the last thing I want to do is sort of end up, killed or potentially seriously disabled, or, even just a couple of broken legs would really take you out of the parenting game for quite a prolonged recovery. Even though it's fun, I figured it's just not worth the risk. Yeah, that's not to say I'll never ride a motorcycle again. it was a beautiful bike, but I just wasn't riding it enough. And, it was insurance, rego, maintenance, depreciation, all that. And yeah, so I sold it to a friend, and unfortunately they pranged it pretty much as soon as they bought it off me.
No.
So yeah, pretty sad. But, the thing is, and I think I was kind of inspired to write that article after I read an article from another blogger, and they talked about their experience with not just motorcycles, but I think they refer to them as widgets, or like, any fun lifestyle thing. Maybe it's a jet ski, maybe it's a carbon fiber road bike, maybe, and that if it's not bringing you joy and you're not using it, maybe it's best to just move it on and take that money and put that into something that does bring you happiness and that you are using. And in the case of motorbikes, like, you could probably, like, I could probably go out and buy a motorcycle now similar to what I sold, and it'd probably be cheaper, and I will have had the utility of that money for all these years, plus I'll now be buying it for a lower amount. So, nothing's final. Everything's sort of temporary. I mean, geez, everything in life is temporary, isn't it? But yeah, certainly in that regard, you could buy a motorbike, or you could borrow a friend's motorbike, or you could hire one from a company if you ever wanted to experience that thrill again. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much once again for being my guest. I know when we've caught up in person, it's been a few times now. There's always so much to talk about. But it's so lovely to be able to share some of your insights and also your life journey with my listeners. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Serena. I really appreciate you inviting me on. And yeah, it's challenging lining up all the timelines and stuff. So I'm glad we got to do it. Yeah, love to do it again. And also I'm gonna try and commit to try and do a few more podcasts again on my channel now that we're all set up. So yeah, I'd love to also invite you onto the Captain Fire podcast as well, and would love to hear a little bit more about your background in the Frugalista.
Excellent. You are on. So wonderful. We'll have lots of more future podcasting. That'll be great. So thank you so much.
Awesome, thanks, Serena. Have a good night. Bye.